Right, good afternoon. So we're going to take the next hour to talk about games and more specifically about the intersection of games and online video. I'm going to do a little 10-minute landscape presentation just to try and demystify where we are in terms of games and games content on online video platforms. And then Rich, very kindly, is going to do a 10-minute presentation on Yogscast. He's the former GM of Yogscast. And then we're going to do a 40-minute panel session discussing the different areas and trends within this kind of burgeoning sector, which still is a little bit Wild West in its activities, I would say. So I think I wanted to start out just by highlighting the importance of games to the wider entertainment media landscape. So this is Western European spend on entertainment media across some main segments. I haven't included pay TV on this chart because it's a little bit off the scale and it would make games look very small. And I wanted to highlight how great games was. But in terms of cinema box office, video content and music, games is a bigger opportunity in terms of consumer spending than those markets, not including ad revenues. This is about consumer spend. So it's a major pillar of the entertainment media market. And it's also a very international market. So of the $82 billion that was spent on games content globally, 45% of that came from Asia Pacific. And that's not just Japan, that's some major markets like China, which is a substantial online market for games as well. And if you look at what's actually driving the growth in the market, it is basically digital opportunities. And it's really about not just about the audience expansion, connecting with audiences on new devices. It's about the flexibility of the content, which allows games content holders to apply very recurring and open-ended business models in terms of monetization, which they're doing very effectively in the digital space. So that audience, a very savvy digital audience, an audience that is very connected, an audience that spends a lot of time online, you would expect there to be a big amount of activity in terms of online video platforms, certainly the user-generated or the upload video platforms, and more progressively the streaming platforms such as Twitch. And these are two kind of headline stats, a little bit vanity metrics. I think Randall might have a go at me because of these. But the 10 billion views, for example, that was an aggregated number for the last year for only the top 10 channels that related to Minecraft content. So 10 billion views over a year, a substantial viewership, you would agree. 27 million watched the final last year of the League of Legends Esports Cup, Summoners Cup final. Is everyone familiar with esports?
Explain it, go on.
I'm going to explain, but can I have a hand up for everyone that understands esports and knows about it? Oh, so it's pretty strong. So esports is the organized, competitive multiplayer gaming scene. It's basically tournaments to play games against each other in a very organized, competitive fashion. So 27 million people watched the final of that, and that was a combination of broadcast and live streaming platforms, but in effect, the live streaming platforms has allowed it to address a much bigger audience. So if you look at the landscape for games content on video platforms, there's obviously two standout platforms. YouTube is the dominant platform in terms of pre-recorded content, and Twitch has emerged as the live streaming dominant platform. And there is a few sort of standout smaller companies or companies that operate that are sort of kind of in behind the scenes, which could have an impact on these major players. So Facebook is a company which are obviously keeping a close eye on in terms of their video strategy. We think there could be some significant disruption for them coming into the market. And then there's companies like Tencent that have their own live streaming platform for games like League of Legends, which they have ownership of the Riot Games, which runs that particular game. And if you look at the value chain for games content on online video platforms, there's obviously, we've identified new companies which are influencing the game sector and have a much more growing influence in terms of the community that are built around these games. So in the pre-recorded space, we have multi-channel networks, and we have independent producers and networks. Some of them are represented here today. We have esports operators, and progressively what we describe as kind of pro streamers, independent individuals which are streaming on a regular basis in-game content, and they're building quite significant follower numbers. I'll just grab a drink. Thank you very much. So, games content categories. These are the three main areas that online video games content produce. So basically, we've got company release stuff, which is the marketing segment. We've got what we describe as infotainment, which is like an extension from the games media websites into YouTube. And then we've got perhaps the most interesting area, which is the entertainment sector, which is basically either esports on one end or let's play content on the other. Basically, let's play content is personality-driven content where people, a personality plays through a game and uploads that onto the site. And that's been a big driver behind the consumption of content which is games-related on YouTube. And you can see that in these numbers, which track the personality-driven third-party kind of YouTuber channels, which are sort of making their way into independent networks versus the subscribers for the official channels of those games. And you can see here the power of those individuals in the context of YouTube. And there's a number of, as Yogscast is represented there in terms of subscriber numbers. This is, not just views, this is subscriber numbers, which is an important sort of engagement measure, although it does say views on the side there, that's a mislabeling. And in terms of the content, so we talked about let's play content, we talked about entertainment, and there's been a trend last year, for example, of huge viewership of games which are related to kind of slapstick entertainment. Also horror-based games where people watch along to people playing really kind of scary game experience, personality-driven experiences. And they are what's driving the kind of third-party content in this segment. If you compare that to the more traditional first-party videos, which is all these big properties on the right-hand side here, there's obviously quite a significant difference between the indie content and the AAA content. These big properties are mostly driven by the company content. Some of those have branched over and reached over into the third-party area. So Grand Theft Auto is a good example there. That has done some significant engagement with the third-party YouTubers. So beyond the YouTube scene, there's obviously live streaming as well. So live streaming, which has been dominated more progressively by Twitch. There's obviously a number of live streaming platforms, additional live streaming platforms out there. But that has been the sort of engine behind the impressive growth in esports consumption. So we expect viewership of esports to rise up to approaching 7,000 million hours of consumption by 2018. It's already growing quite significantly, and you can see that our forecast is really driven by online consumption through live streaming platforms rather than broadcast TV. Again, it's a multi an international and multi-regional proposition as well. And where that's being monetized, we expect there to be significantly more monetization in terms of those live streaming viewer numbers and programmatic ad trading. So those two coming together to actually monetize on a more effective basis for this opportunity. So we're developing this idea about how the sector has evolved. Obviously, we had YouTube launch in 2005. We had 10 years of YouTube. Over that time, we've had a professionalization of that platform. More recently, we've had live streaming platforms which have become more engaged in terms of games content, and we're entering this sector now, or this phase, where there's an ongoing change, and some characteristics include more in-game streaming, more in-game video editors, new platforms coming to the fore. So Facebook is definitely going to be a disruptor in the future. Steam platform allows for in-game streaming, and a number of different changes that are coming into the play. So some of the key trends that are shaping the sector as we see it. Basically, while we've had some professionalization of the YouTube scene, there's still some way to go, we feel. So more progressive professionalization in relation to transparency of commercial relationships. So if you're presenting a particular game to a group, an audience of young gamers, they need to be aware that you've got a professional or commercial relationship with that particular game or the content holder. Monetization. So the question of CPMs and whether they're enough to actually sustain these businesses, that's an area which we'll be investigating on the panel. And also, investigating the idea of new platforms coming into the space, Facebook, as I mentioned. And also the idea that much more content will be flowing onto these platforms, leading to more fragmentation. Is that going to impact on discoverability? And that's one of the issues which I know Randall has brought up with me in the past. The idea of discoverability, are the platforms doing enough to help people find content or good content on the platforms? Thank you very much.